Hi everyone, welcome to the visual guide for the Burden of the Father. This is currently the last floor available in the Alexander raid, made available by patch 3.01 in Final Fantasy XIV Heavensward. I feel like I've manipulated you guys enough to listen to my stupid puns, so we're gonna get right to the good stuff. My name is MAGITEK and I'll be your raid guide. This encounter has 3 phases, with you dealing with one part of the boss at a time. In the first phase, pick a leg and burn it down. Don't bother splitting damage, as when one dies, the other will heal to full. It's very important to know that there is a lot of unavoidable splash damage throughout the entire fight, especially around the main tank. To avoid unnecessary damage, all players should spread out, ensuring you're not cleaving each other with extra hits. One of the tanks should always maintain primary threat on the boss. The boss will periodically throw out a pretty spicy hit that is better soaked by the tank than by an unsuspecting DPS or healer. The off-tank and a random DPS will be sucked in through a tube to fight an ad in quarantine. Kill this as soon as possible to be returned back to the main fight. In this first phase, he will also mark up a random player with this blue mark, indicating that they will be targeted by a number of spawned orbs. These orbs will spawn in 2 sets of 3 at random points around the room. Getting hit by one of these orbs does a fair amount of damage, and you should be healed up before eating the next. To handle this simply, have your 2 tanks each cover one side of the room to soak these orbs as necessary. These mechanics will repeat until the first leg is down. At this point, the manipulator will be vulnerable to damage for a short time. Healers watch out for the AoE damage during the transition. On to leg number 2. Instead of orbs, this phase will spawn 3 MAGITEK bits around the room that will target a random player with these lines, indicating that they are about to take a fair amount of splash damage. You want to minimize as much damage as possible, and other players and tanks should run in to intercept these lines, spreading the damage between them. If a player takes all 3 hits, they will probably die. Next up, these dolls will spawn that will periodically apply debuffs to all players in a wide AoE circle around them. These ads need to be killed before this debuff reaches 4, or affected players will explode and probably die, taking anyone next to them down in the process. Have your damage dealers switch to each of these as soon as they come up. The off-tank and a random DPS will continue to be sucked away in this phase as well. These mechanics continue until the second leg is down, at which point you'll be able to hit the manipulator again. Another raid-wide AoE will go off that should be healed through, and phase 3 will begin. This is essentially another combo of all previous phases. Remember to stay spread out as much as possible, especially in tight areas like melee. The random slash damage can be very spicy in this phase, so make sure everyone has their own space bubble. Judgment NISI is one of the more important mechanics of the phase and will affect both healers at the same time. This places a 5-stack debuff that does a blast of damage to its victim for every stack over time. The higher the stack, the more damage the blast, so it's important that both healers top themselves off before the next blast. If healers are too close to each other or anyone else during this time, they will spread the debuff and die. I recommend set positions for each player to ensure everyone is sufficiently spread out. Since healing is quite intensive during this time, other players need to be on the lookout to take laser tethers off of the healers. However, if you do this, be extremely careful not to get too close to the healers, or you'll catch the debuff yourself, which is ultimately worse. Healers also need to watch out for the AoE laser show that does a fair amount of raid damage. Lastly, the manipulator will cast Discord, a multi-hit mechanic. The boss will first target 4 players with ground AoEs that should obviously be avoided. This will happen twice before slamming the tank with a large hit. This last aspect of Discord is a mechanic similar to Akmorn, in that it does increase tank damage the more times it is cast. Cooldown and heal through this appropriately, saving heavier cooldowns for later on in the fight. This phase will repeat until the boss is down. Remember to spread out and keep the healers topped off. If you're having trouble with incredibly high damage on random players, make sure you have a tank always maintain primary threat on the manipulator. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you back again in 2 weeks for Savage. Happy hunting!